UN Secretary-General has called on the international community to work together to fight the spread of the Covid-19 virus. Bolivian social movements will present complaints against the de facto government to the UN Human Rights Council. And tensions are rising between Turkey and Syria as the fighting escalates in Idlib province. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. Mexico confirmed the country's first and second case of the Covid-19 virus on Friday. Undersecretary for Health Hugo Lopez-Gatell reported that one of the patients is isolated at the National Institute of Respiratory Diseases in Mexico City, while the other is in the northern state Sinaloa, and neither is seriously ill. The secretary also explained that one of the patients had contact with someone who had travelled to the northern Italian region at the heart of Europe's largest outbreak of the virus. Tests are also being conducted on a 28-year-old American woman who remains under observation at a hospital in Mexicali to determine whether she was infected by the coronavirus during a trip to several European countries.
We are ready to face the coronavirus situation. We have the doctors, we have the specialists, we have the hospitals, and the capability to confront the coronavirus situation.
And Undersecretary Hugo Lopez-Gatell stressed that the confirmation of cases of coronavirus in the country should not be regarded an emergency.
Influenza is an endemic disease in the Northern Hemisphere, including Mexico. Therefore, there is no reason whatsoever for it to be regarded as an emergency situation in the country.
Brazil's Executive Secretary of the Ministry for Health, João Gabardo dos Reis, explained on Friday that 132 suspected cases of the new coronavirus have been detected in the country. The majority have been reported in Sao Paulo City, while 85 patients remain under observation. Nigeria confirmed its first case of the Covid-19 virus in Abuja on Friday. The patient is an Italian citizen who flew in from Milan earlier this week. Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, with some 190 million people, is viewed as one of the world's most vulnerable to the spread of the virus, given its weak health system and high population density.
This is that the Federal Ministry of Health has confirmed a coronavirus disease case in Lagos, Nigeria, known as COVID-19. The case was confirmed on the 27th of February 2020 and is the first to be reported in Nigeria since the beginning of the outbreak in China in January 2020. We have started working to identify all the contacts of the patient since he entered Nigeria, and even those who were with him on the aircraft.
The Iranian parliament has suspended its sessions due to the spread of the coronavirus in the country, where several top officials have been infected. On Thursday, it was announced that Masoumeh El-Tekka, Iran's Vice President for Women and Family Affairs, tested positive for the Covid-19 virus. Deputy Health Minister Iraj Havichi and lawmaker Mahmoud Sadeghi were also diagnosed the previous day. The death toll in Iran has increased to 34, as confirmed by a Ministry of Health spokesperson on Friday. The country has reported 388 cases of infection. Lebanon's Education Ministry on Friday announced the closure of all schools until March 8th as a precautionary measure against the spread of the coronavirus. The announcement came as the country's fourth case of the virus was confirmed. The patient is a Syrian national isolated at a Beirut hospital. Lebanon's first 3 coronavirus cases were linked to passengers arriving on flights from Iran, which has seen the highest number of deaths from the virus outside of China. Lebanon has since halted flights for non-residents from countries with confirmed outbreaks, including China, Iran, Italy and South Korea, according to the Transport Ministry. And at least 83,991 cases of coronavirus have been confirmed worldwide, the vast majority of which in China. The death toll in mainland China now stands at 2,788. The UN Health Agency highlighted on Friday that China's strategy has averted or at least delayed hundreds of thousands of cases and played a significant role in protecting the global community. The Minister of China's National Health Commission, Mai Xiaowei, noted during a press conference that despite successes in containing the virus, there is a risk of the epidemic rebounding as people begin to return to work and school. The central Chinese government is now encouraging businesses to reopen in order to boost the recovery of the economy. Outside China, cases have been confirmed in 56 other countries. And the World Health Organization has raised its assessment of the global coronavirus risk from high to very high, the most serious assessment in its new 4-stage alert system.
The continued increase in the number of cases and the number of affected countries over the last few days are clearly of concern. Our epidemiologists have been monitoring these developments continuously, and we have now increased our assessment of the risk of spread and the risk of impact of COVID-19 to very high at global level. What we see at the moment are linked epidemics of COVID-19 in several countries, but most cases can still be traced to known contacts or clusters of cases. We do not see evidence as yet that the virus is spreading freely in communities. As long as that's the case, we still have a chance of containing this virus if robust action is taken to detect cases early, isolate and care for patients, and trace contacts. In the past 24 hours, China reported 329 cases, the lowest in more than a month. As of 6 a.m. Geneva time this morning, China has reported a total of 78,959 cases of COVID-19 to WHO, including 2,791 deaths. Outside China, there are now 4,351 cases in 49 countries and 67 deaths. Since yesterday, Denmark, Estonia, Lithuania, Netherlands, and Nigeria have all reported their first cases. All these cases have links to Italy. 24 cases have been exported from Italy to 14 countries, and 97 cases have been exported from Iran to 11 countries.
And UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, referring to the COVID-19 virus this Friday, attempted to reassure the international community and urged preparation to counter the spread of the epidemic.
As WHO Director General Dr. Tedros said, the greatest enemy right now is not the virus, it is fear, rumors and stigma. Now it's the time for all governments to step up and do everything possible to contain the disease, and to do so without stigmatization and respecting human rights. We know containment is possible, but the window of opportunity is narrowing.
Coming up after this break, the Venezuelan Vice President began an official visit to Qatar this Friday. Stay with us for more. Welcome back. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez began an official visit to Qatar this Friday. The Venezuelan Foreign Ministry announced on its Twitter account that the Vice President had arrived in Qatar to strengthen bilateral relations and cooperation as part of the diplomacy of peace promoted by the Venezuelan government. Meanwhile, the Vice President stated that on undertaking the trip, she was following the path of Commander Hugo Chavez, which is today consolidated by President Nicolas Maduro. Colombia's Common Alternative Revolutionary Force Party denounced the assassination of yet another former guerrilla. The party reported that the assassination of Holman Fabio Montes Sanchez occurred in the municipality of San Vicente del Caguan in the south of the country. Montes is the 14th former guerrilla killed this year. Since the signing of the 2016 peace deal between the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia People's Army and the Colombian state, a total of 186 former guerrilla fighters have been killed. A report by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights described 2019 as the most violent year for former FARC combatants. And a recent poll conducted in Colombia revealed that 71% of the population disapproves of the government of President Iván Duque. The Gallup poll revealed on Friday that the popularity of Iván Duque's administration has fallen sharply. Most of those surveyed believe the situation in the country is getting worse. They identified corruption, lower incomes and public order and security as the main problems. The poll carried out in the main cities of the country also revealed that Senator and former President Álvaro Uribe is the second most unpopular politician in the country, rejected by 62% of the population. The Executive Secretary of the Bartolina Sisa National Federation of Peasant Women of Bolivia, Segundina Flores, announced that Bolivia's main social movements would announce the de facto government at the Human Rights Council in Geneva.
Porque en el país no hay justicia, no hay derecho y tenemos que acudir.
Because there's no justice or right in this country, we have to resort to international law. In this regard, our organization will travel to Geneva in March to file a complaint before the Human Rights Council.
Heavy rains are wreaking havoc in various Latin American countries. Colombia remains in a state of emergency after strong floods due to intense rains in the Andean region of the country. Authorities have reported 8 deaths and at least 14 people missing. The cities of Bogotá and Santander are the worst affected. In Ecuador, the National Meteorology Institute reported that rainfall will continue in the coastal, Andean and Amazon regions. Heavy rains have flooded various areas and 1 death was reported after a car crash related to the harsh weather conditions. Meanwhile, thunderstorms prompted the suspension of airport operations as well as power outages. The intense downpours have also left thousands of victims and damages in Peru and Bolivia, where at least 18 people have been killed and more than 11,000 have seen their homes destroyed. Chile's Minister of Education, Marcela Cubillos, resigned from her position on Friday, just 2 days before the start of the new school year. According to the president of the Chilean Teachers Association, Mario Aguila, the move comes following an agreement by the union's National Assembly calling for her resignation. Aguila said that the minister was an obstacle rather than a contribution to advancing educational matters in Chile. The position will be filled by Education Undersecretary Raúl Figueroa. President of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, stressed on Friday the will of the Cuban population to resist the aggressions of the United States in the face of new restrictions on remittances to the Caribbean island. Díaz-Canel described Washington's decision as another attack against the Cuban people, after the suspension of global money transfers to Cuba through Western Union, except those issued from the United States. Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez also stated that this measure responds to the U.S. interventionist policy that violates the sovereignty of third states and reinforces the extraterritorial nature of the blockade, which harms Cuban families. The Guyana Elections Commission has been accused of deliberately frustrating the electoral process underway in the country. The People's Progressive Party General Secretary, Barak Jagdeo, accused a select group of Commission personnel of attempting to block decisions, including the move to increase the number of polling stations for the upcoming general elections. At his weekly press briefing, Jagdeo explained that although the issue of additional polling stations was resolved following a meeting with the Commission on Tuesday, the use of private residences as polling stations was reduced in areas that traditionally support the People's Progressive Party, pointing to voter suppression. El Salvador's Legislative Assembly has approved a reconciliation law. This after the Constitutional Court declared a 1993 amnesty law was unconstitutional as it favoured those who committed crimes against humanity. We have more details in the following report.
The day after the reconciliation law was passed, relatives of victims murdered by the Salvadoran military in 1982 arrived at the forensic service to retrieve their relatives' remains.
These were people who were in the Las Vegas parish in Nueva Trinidad when the army came to their homes and told them to prepare a soup from the chicken that they had. When Maria Santo went to get the chicken, she was pulled by the hair and she was tortured until she died along with her husband.
Facts like these are used as examples by the families and social movements that have been demanding justice, truth and compensation from the members of the Legislative Assembly, who during an extraordinary session approved the reconciliation law with 44 votes. Several lawmakers opposed the law.
The text of this law has been read, and it doesn't meet the principles of truth, justice and reparations, nor does it guarantee that such things will not happen again. They are including a confidentiality clause for many armed forces files, so no one will be able to access them.
According to social movements, the approval of the law benefits war criminals. Article 67 of the law says judges can reduce the sentence when the accused recognizes his participation in the crime, asks for forgiveness, and collaborates with the investigation.
It can be a reconciliation when they have asked the victims what they want, but are not giving it to them, when they pass it at night and almost in secret, when they are forcing the victims and social organizations to begin another long, unconstitutional process, and all the while, more people are dying and no one can demand justice.
The government of President Nayib Bukele announced it will veto the law because it protects war criminals. The crimes committed during El Salvador's civil war left more than 75,000 people dead and disappeared, something the relatives are not about to forget.
And after this final break, we'll take a look at developments in Syria. Don't go away. Welcome back. And we begin in Africa, where the Togolese government banned a peaceful demonstration in the capital convened for this Friday to reject the fourth re-election of President Faure Gnassingbé following elections last Saturday. On Thursday afternoon, former Prime Minister Dr. Aguiyomi Mesankojo, one of the 2020 presidential candidates, assured members of his party and other supporters that the demonstration would still be held as planned. The main opposition party claimed fraud following the release of the provisional results by the National Independent Electoral Commission on Monday. The protesters planned to march peacefully on Friday afternoon and rally outside the French embassy. The African Union announced on Friday that it was recalling a team sent to observe a constitutional referendum and legislative elections in Guinea on Sunday due to fears of violence. In a statement, the African Union cited major controversy surrounding the country's electoral register and the impossibility of the Economic Community of West African States of conferring with President Alpha Condé ahead of the high-stakes vote. The European Union has also voiced its concern. Tensions are rising between Turkey and Syria, while the United Nations, NATO and Russia are calling for a de-escalation of the violence to assist civilians trapped in the war zone. At least 33 Turkish soldiers died in a Syrian army attack on a terrorist-held area in northwestern Syria in a major escalation of the conflict. The Turkish and Russian presidents held a phone call on Friday regarding the developments. According to the Kremlin, both expressed concern and agreed on the need for additional measures to normalize the situation, with the possibility of a summit in the near future. Meanwhile, talks between Turkish and Russian delegations continue over the latest developments in Syria's Idlib province. And Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Friday reconfirmed support for agreements reached between Russia and Turkey over the de-escalation in northern Syria. Likewise, Lavrov recalled the right of the Syrian authorities to fight terrorists in Idlib province.
We confirm our commitment to the agreements that were reached by the President of Russia and Turkey in terms of what needs to be done in the de-escalation zone in Idlib, in order to separate the legitimate opposition from terrorists, to demilitarize an internal strip in that zone in order to prevent anyone from firing on the Syrian forces and the Russian military base, and ensure unhindered use of the roads which pass through that zone.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg called on Russia and Syria to halt their offensive in Idlib after a meeting of NATO ambassadors which expressed solidarity with Turkey. Apart from providing some aerial surveillance over Syria, NATO plays no direct role in the conflict-torn country, but its members are deeply divided over Turkey's actions there. European allies are concerned about the possibility of a new wave of Syrian refugees. The emergency NATO meeting in Brussels was convened at Turkey's request to hold consultations on developments in Syria. And UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres also voiced grave concern about the escalation of violence in northwest Syria and repeated his call for an immediate ceasefire. Guterres stressed that the solution to the conflict in Syria is not military, but political. As fighting continued along several fronts on Thursday, the United Nations said it was having catastrophic humanitarian consequences. At least 134 civilians, including 44 children, were killed in February, and many schools and hospitals have been destroyed.
Have fled in the latest fighting.
Israeli forces attacked occupied territories in the West Bank, Jerusalem and Gaza on Friday. At least 40 Palestinians, including a teenager, were injured during clashes with Israeli forces in the West Bank city of Nablus. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society confirmed the casualties, reporting that they included a 16-year-old who was wounded in the back with live bullets. 15 people were also treated with rubber bullet injuries, and there were 24 cases of asphyxia due to tear gas fired by Israeli forces. The international medical humanitarian organisation, Doctors Without Borders, has accused Italian authorities of enforcing discriminatory quarantine measures against the ship rescuing migrants at sea under the pretext of the novel coronavirus. Doctors Without Borders, which operates the Ocean Viking rescue ship, has announced that the vessel has been anchored off Sicily for nearly 5 days, following the disembarkation of 276 people rescued at sea. The humanitarian NGO maintains that the crew have complied with all measures and that none of the team have reported any symptoms of the virus. However, Italian authorities have yet to lift the quarantine order. Michael Fark, head of the mission for search and rescue in the Mediterranean, has said that quarantining the Ocean Viking is equivalent to stopping an ambulance in the middle of an emergency. The Greek islands of Lesbos and Chios saw a general strike on Friday to protest against central government plans to build migrant detention centres there. Clashes between protesters and police erupted during the mobilisations. The government intends to begin works on the new camp in March in order to transfer refugees and asylum seekers in the summer. The Greek islands have received tens of thousands of people fleeing conflict and poverty in the Middle East, Africa and Asia. Long delays in the asylum process and increased migrant flows have led to severe overcrowding in the existing migrant camps. And finally, China is making unremitting efforts to win the battle against poverty this year, even in the face of the coronavirus outbreak. Hu Chunhui, a member of the Political Bureau of the Communist Party of China, urged to prioritise recruitment into the labour force of poverty-stricken sectors of the population, including support for industries and families falling back into poverty due to the epidemic. A total of 17 new counties in northern China's Shaanxi province have been removed from the country's list of impoverished counties as efforts continue to eradicate poverty. And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss.